panel for Star Trek. How you doing? I'm McCarthy. Nice to be here. There's no one here to moderate, so I'll moderate myself. So we can start anywhere you want. We can start at, you know, Pretty in Pink, Weekend at Bernie's, Orange is the New Black, anywhere you like. Would anyone like to ask a question first? And that'll sort of get us going. Hi, speak loud, I'm deaf.
Is Mannequin based on a true story?
Yeah, Mannequin is a true story. You know, in 30 years, I think that's the first time anyone's ever asked that question. It was not based on, just as far as I know, but the sequel was. Anyway, one of the bad trivia questions of Mannequin is we filmed most of that at nighttime, all night long, because we couldn't get into that department store until they closed up at the end of the day. So we go in at 6 o'clock when they close, and we shoot all night till 6 in the morning, and then we go home. So we were big vampires long before the vampire trend. So, but no, it's not a true story. Next question, that's your last question.
Is Weekend at Bernie's based on it?
Your Weekend at Bernie's okay, anybody on this side? Although, Weekend at Bernie's, you see, I live in New York, and just recently there was, well, last year there was a guy, he had died, and his two buddies wheeled him to a check cashing place, and they just kept him outside while they went in with his unemployment check to try and cash it, and they were arrested. And just recently, last week or something, there was some river somewhere where it was a, did anybody see this? These people that were under the river, they photographed, they found them under the river. There was this couple having tea, and they, you know, had this whole Weekend at Bernie's jokes get trotted out again. Anytime there's a dead person being dragged around by live people, the Weekend at Bernie's jokes, you know. Or politicians named Bernie start running for office, they get dragged out. Yes, back there. Hi.
Hi. Out of all the movies you've done, what's your favorite?
Of all the movies I've done, it's my favorite. It's, you know, I'm a big fan of Bernie. I mean, Bernie has its own rewards. You know, he holds up well. What's interesting is the different sort of demographics that like different movies. Like, I can tell often when people come up to me which movie it is they're going to respond to. You know, I go, oh, here comes the Bernie guy. People have to be careful of the less than zero people. See? And then, no, but my favorite, you know, I liked the part I played in St. Elmo's Fire quite a lot, and I thought that was good. I played a part on a television show called Lipstick Jungle not that long ago, and I loved doing that part. I was playing a billionaire, so that was fun. And I'm actually going to do a new television show starting in the fall on ABC, and it's a fun part. It's a kind of a thriller. The show's called The Family. A new show, and that part we just did pilot, and that was really fun. I hadn't acted in a number of years. I hadn't acted in like almost 5 years because I've been directing television shows mostly, and so I hadn't really acted much. And so it was really fun to just act again. I didn't realize how much, you know, it's such a part. I've been doing it since I was a young guy, so it was nice to do it. But I don't know. I like a movie called Heaven Help Us a lot from when that early phase of movies. I like that movie a lot. I thought about how many people saw it. It was about a Catholic school in the 60s in Brooklyn. And I like the part of St. Elmo's Fire. I thought that was fun. Pretty in Pink, some of you may be disappointed to know I was always shocked that Pretty in Pink was in any way successful. I thought when they asked me when I was going to do it, I thought this is a movie about a girl who makes a dress and goes to a dance. Who would want to see this movie? It's kind of embarrassing. And so, as you know, 25 years later, I was right. So, so I was always shocked at the success of Pretty in Pink, but it really touched on something for now a couple generations of people. You know, that idea of, you know, and not even you people would be able to answer better than me what it touched on. To me, it was always just like, really? But I mean, I'm glad. I think it's nice because people are really moved by it. You know, it's one of the nicer parts of my job is that occasionally people just come up and say things that the movies, or particularly Weekend at Bernie's, they go, wow, I was really sick and in bed in the hospital for X amount of time, and I just watched that movie every day, and it made me laugh, and it got me through, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry. No wonder you were in the hospital so long. But anyway, so that doesn't answer your question. No, what was the question? My favorite movie? I don't have one. You know, I like parts that I played, I like moments in movies. But you know, when I was young, I thought the part in St. Elmo's Fire captured who I was more than any other movie, I would say, for sure. And I did a movie called Quiet Days in Clichy, which is a French film that no one here would have seen, and that was probably my favorite film, but no one would have seen it. And it was based on a Henry Miller book. But anyway, anybody around this side?
Do you still keep in contact with all the actors that you work with?
Yes, we see each other weekly. No, that's what everyone wants me to say, and it's funny because yes and no. I mean, I run into people, and I work now with James Spader a lot because I do direct Orange as Blacklist often, but I haven't seen Jimmy in 15 years, but it was like yesterday when we saw each other again and started in on it again, and he's like, "You're still telling me what to do, Andrew." But now you're not listening at all, James. So it's like, just like you used to. But I run into people. You know, it's funny because you make a movie and it's like 8 weeks of your life when you're 22, and then it's sealed there forever. And people think, well, you don't see Molly every week? I'm like, well, when I was 22, I did for 8 weeks. I saw her every day, but I haven't got to, you know. So no is the short answer. It's always nice when I do, because I think all the people in like the Broad Pack and all that stuff have a real common bond that is bigger than all of us, you know, and it's beyond, and we're the only ones who can really understand what that was, because we lived through it and live with the sort of ramifications years later of it, you know. So there's a certain kind of, you know, we should have a secret handshake for being like a club, you know what I mean, and we know what that's like, and it's great, you know, and you've touched a lot of people and all that stuff, so it's really kind of cool. But I live in New York too, so I don't hang out with a lot of the Malibu dudes. So that's the, you know, when I see him, I was like, hey, Amelia, what's up, dude? You know, but do we hang? No, Amelia's had this vineyard picking grapes, you know, and I haven't seen Judd Nelson since, you know, the day I wrapped St. Elmo's Fire with him. I mean, for no reason. So. Anyway, yeah. TV show that I'm on? I do a lot of the show Orange is the New Black. I'm going to start it in the next season. Is that what you asked? What shows I'm directing? Yeah, I'll do that. I've done a bunch of that show, and I'll start again at the beginning of June. And then I'll do that for a couple of months, and then I'll go to do Blacklist again. And then I start acting on that show for ABC. We'll do that in the fall. And I did a show called Happy on that show. It's a new Showtime show, which is, you know, directing TV is a funny thing because it's, each show has its own distinct personality. You know, and when you're directing, you just sort of walk into this new personality, so it's like dating a different person every week, and you sort of have to get used to them very quickly. You know, and each TV show has its own neurotic kind of, it's like a family. It's really interesting and neurotic and in its own way, and you have to learn what that way is. You know what I mean? Who's in charge? Who are people afraid of? You know, all that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting dynamic, an interesting thing. But and I directed a show called Turn. Do you know this Revolutionary War show called Turn? I think about 4 people watched it. I thought it was a really good show. 2 of those 4 people were here, and I saw it. So it's 3 of us, and that last guy, I don't know where he is. But it's a fun show to do because there's lots of, you know, battle scenes, and then of course it's getting shot and swords and, you know, funny costumes. What do you think of shows like that? Yeah. Was there another? Hello over there. The young lady behind you. Oh, all right, you can start first. Sorry? Kingdom Hospital was a big disappointment, I think, for everyone because they had very high hopes for it. We shot it up in Vancouver for like 8 months, and we were shooting it before, you know, normally you kind of shoot shows, you sell episodes, and if it dies, then it sort of dies. And this was like, he'd written all 13 episodes, and we were just going to go shoot them all, and they were going to start airing them at some near the end of when we were shooting, and they were all counting on a massive success. And that didn't happen, and the show came out and sort of didn't do well. I think, honestly, the show was like 13 episodes, like 15 hours, and if it were probably 10 hours, it would have been really good. Because because I just think there was some fat in it that and no one tells Stephen King. Steve, this is great, maybe we should cut this. There's just no one to tell him. You know, the pages were white, which means that in TV, and in movies, you get your white script, it's on white paper, and then when there are rewrites, the first one's, you know, pink and then blue and green and yellow, so you kind of, your script ends up looking rainbow colored by the end of it. And on that show, because there's always rewrites and sort of changes, and writers have this, and directors have thoughts, and people have input, and actors say, I'm not saying that, and they go, okay, I'll change it, you know, and then you get a blue page. And so your script looks, there are very few white pages left by the time you really shoot it usually. And on Kingdom Hospital, every page was white for the whole time. Nobody was telling Stephen King anything. And he wasn't even there. He was just like, this is the script, this is what we're shooting, okay? And okay, cool, it's Stephen King, it's good, he must know. And I think he did a large movie, but I think it was also adapted from a Danish series, I think. So and so then Stephen came down for one weekend, like 3 days later. It was after his accident where he got hit by the side of the road, so he was very sick for a long time, so he couldn't come. And then he came to Toronto or Vancouver to visit the set for several days, and we were all terribly nervous. And then he just never bothered to come to Sexy because he really liked the set. But he, you know, we had my memories. He's a really nice guy. We had several big dinners, and I had a breakfast with Malone one morning. And he said, "You're the lead of my show, so I guess we should have breakfast." I'm like, okay, I don't write lunch, but I'll take breakfast. You know? So, and he was very nice and remote in that Stephen King kind of way, like, what's he really thinking? You know, but really nice guy, you know. But he was still in a lot of pain then from his that accident he got run over on the side of the road. And the show didn't work. I think he was very disappointed by it because I mean, everyone, and we were all disappointed because it was on the air, and then it was one of those things where they knew foreign it would sell a lot, so we had to keep. They would have canceled it. The network would have canceled it after, but we had to shoot like the last 3. There's nothing more depressing than being on a show, which happens fairly often. We're on a show, and it doesn't do well. Right? No matter how good it is, people just aren't watching for whatever reason, and they cancel it, and you've got to keep shooting because they've sold it to foreign markets, and so you're just doing a job that's already dead in the water. And Kingdom Hospital was a bit like that. It was still on, limping along because of their relationship with Stephen King. They had to, you know, keep honoring that because they wanted to continue in the future. But it was one of those things by the end, he was like, let's just get out of here. This is dead. And it was dead. And you're shooting about death and all this weird Stephen Kingness. So it was a complicated, it started out as a very exciting experience and then ended in like, wow, this just didn't work, did it? But that's the way it is, you know what I mean? I've done so many things where I thought, like Pretty in Pink, where I thought this is going to be an embarrassing, silly little movie. And, you know, 30 years later, we're still talking about it. And other things you think, this is great, this is really interesting, this is original, this is not been seen, and it dies. You just never know. And all the years of news, you never know what's going to work, what will capture people, what won't. And there's so many elements involved in filmmaking or TV making, you know, that the script is a prerequisite, but then personalities, and then this chemistry, you know, you get lightning in a bottle sometimes. 2 people are fantastic in a room together. Me and Molly were terrific together. New. You know, that movie, Pretty in Pink, started, the end of it, the original ending of Pretty in Pink was Molly ended up with the John Cryer character, and they did a test, you know, I don't show up at the prom, which is segueing off for Stephen King, but I don't show up at the prom, and Molly ends up with John Cryer, and they tested that for an audience, and the audience is like, love this movie till the end when she ends up with that ducky guy. That's terrible. And so they called me back, they called me up, and you know, we're going to reshoot the ending. I'm like, okay, come out to LA for 1 day, we're going to reshoot it, and you get the girl. Which I have to say, I told them. I go, guys, I'm sorry, but I should just apologize and get the girl. And they said, no, that's terrible, I'm not going to do that. It's about friendship and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, what do I know? And then they called me back until I got to say, I told you so. And we reshot the end, and the rest, as they say, is, you know, history. And so the audience very much tells people what they want, you know, and what they're willing to take. You know, that's only when you shoot a pilot now. We shoot our pilot, and it's great, everybody's convinced how great it is, but then they do a test screening in an audience, you know, somewhere in Ohio somewhere or something. Nothing gets to Ohio. And people sit there with little, do you know about this? They sit there in this room with a little dial, and when something happens they like, they turn the dial up. When something happens they don't like, they turn the dial down. And they re-edit the entire show based on what those 30 people in that room thought. And it's complicated because if you're the villain, every time you walk in, they're like, ooh, they turn it down, and they're like, well, they hate the villain. Like, of course they hate the villain. You're supposed to hate the villain. Which is no fun if you're the villain. But anyway, so the audience very much has a very strong hand in what's done, except for the case of like Stephen King, which this is a show, like in Lump It, and they lumped it and they canceled it, and there you go, Steve. You know, so that was a long rambling answer to that. Sorry. Anyway, hi. The first thing I ever heard when I started in the movie business in 1982 when I was 4, and the first thing I ever heard was, "It's so hard now. You should have been here just a few years ago when the auteurs had their way. You know, it's so different now. It's just so hard." And it's the first thing I ever heard, and I still hear it every day. It's so hard now, and it's so different. And when somebody starts talking to me about how hard it is, I just walk away. I'm so not interested in you telling me how hard it is. If it was, of course it's hard, if it wasn't hard, everyone would be doing it, you know? I mean, and it's always been hard, it's always been changing. I mean, that's what you want. It's constantly evolving, things are changing, evolving. There's some phases that are better than others. Personally, this is the wrong room to say this in, I'm not a great superheroes fan. I don't like every movie I go to be about a superhero. I'm like, can we talk about movies with people? But that's the phase we're in, these giant things, and that'll cycle through, and Marvel will have its day, and they'll make billions upon billions, and then something else will cycle in. So it's, you know, but there's also an outlet for much more things. You know, 30 years ago, there would not have been movies and TV shows about people, you know, transgender people and cross-dressing people and all these kinds of things. So there's outlets everywhere, and you can have a much smaller, and you can reach people in all sorts of ways, and so I think it's fantastic. You know, people lamenting about how it's not like it was. I mean, this is war. And it's just, well, dude, change and stay current. I mean, that's what the only consistent thing, right, is constant change. And it changes fast, and it's going to change fast, and it's always, our perception is that it's changing faster all the time, but when I was a kid, it was like, wow, it's changing so fast. You know, it's always been changing things. When I was a kid, you know, no, the phones are like this, it's fluid. And my daughter saw a phone, she's 8, she saw a phone, like a rotary phone, she goes, "Dad, what is that?" Seriously, she's like, "What is that?" I go, "That's a phone." She goes, "No, that's your phone." You know what I mean? So it just evolves, and you know. So I don't have an issue with that. I think it's nonsense that people are, you know, lamenting the glory days. You know, like now, these are the golden years of television. My God. Yes, All in the Family was a great thing, but there are amazing shows on television now that have never been on. Breaking Bad, these kind of shows have never been on television, network television. So there's outlets all over the place and ways for people to watch all over. And you just have to adapt to where people want to see things and what they want, and what they're interested in. And I think, you know, particularly when you get away from the networks, major networks, they're challenging people in ways and thinking, well, an audience is not dumb, and they're willing to go here, and they're willing to like people that are not necessarily likable, and, you know, are doing bad things, and they're going to follow them. So I'm all for it. You know, it's one of those, anyway, yeah, I'm all for it. It's just a long, winding answer. Anyway, hi.
Is there like an ending to the show that you know about, or if you want to like you go back to like all the characters end up doing this, and you're like, no, and like you're out to be this, like what's your creative control?
Well, your creative control, it depends. It depends what show you're on. It depends whether you're just sort of a guest or whether you're there, a regular director, or whether you're a producer on it. You know, a lot of times you can come in, if you're just sort of a guest director, you come in and you do what the script is and you have no say. But that's it, you know, they often don't know what. They think they know what's going to happen. And then the audience tells them again, they like this person, this relationship works. This television pilot I just acted in, they said, you're going to do this and we're going to kill you in episode 3. It tested really well. So now they're not killing me at all. But you know, if I come on and it's bad, if if they suddenly the people don't like that character again, well, they might kill me again. You know what I mean? So they have it all planned out until it changes. It's like the airlines. You know what I mean? It's like, this is the price, this is the ironclad, there's no negotiation, but tomorrow we're going to change it. You know what I mean? And they do, and they change it all the time. And so it's all sort of completely planned out, because they have to go sell the show to the network. They have their pilot, now the network comes in, come in and have a big meeting, tell us now what happens to season 1. And so the person sits there and goes, well, in episode 3, that guy, the McCarthy character, dies, he gets killed. And then this is, wait a minute, he tested really well. Okay, in episode 13, Andrew McCarthy's character might get killed. Seriously, you know what I mean? So everything goes out the window, and you have a plan. It's like anything, have a plan, be prepared, and then throw it out the window and deal with what's really in front of you. You know, and a lot of it's chemistry between actors and that kind of thing. But just on a walking in with a script, handing the script in front of, television is very much a writer's meeting. Directors in television are not the ultimate arbitrator like they are in films. There's just think of a showrunner, a guy who created the show and oversees his writing staff of like 8 people, usually. And so they're all sort of the writers room talking about story ideas and this and that. And then there's the ultimate showrunner who's sort of overseeing all of that and going, yeah, write that, do that, let's do that. And so it's sort of writing by a committee. And there, the guy who's in charge of that, the showrunner, he's in complete control, basically. And usually those people are never on the set. And often they're never even in the same place. I shoot a lot in New York, and those guys like The Blacklist and Orange is the New Black, they're in LA, those writers in those writers' rooms. So they'll call me on the phone, I'll read the script and go, so, question on this, and they'll go, oh, we just thought this and this, and, you know, and they'll never come to the set. They'll go, we just get on the same page on the phone and sort of go, this is the story, let's make sure we capture this story point, this and this, and now you go shoot it. And they, you know, most writers don't like the set because they don't understand it. They're different jobs entirely, writing and sort of filmmaking are entirely different jobs. You know, and a lot of writers are they have words in their head and they're not visual in that way. They see things, this story, and I see things visually, so that's why I'm turning into a director. You know, so, and often the writer, if the writer is on the set, they'll come and they'll go, no, it's not the way I have it in my mind, the way he's saying it. I'm going, dude, it may not be what's in your mind. Listen to it. Is your story getting told? Because it's never going to be what's in your mind. It's going to be slightly different, and maybe if you just open minded, it'll be better. Because hopefully that's it. Hopefully it'll be better than what's in your mind. Because it's very much of a collaborative sort of stew that it's like good soup. Hopefully all the ingredients make it a better thing. But often you'll get a writer, particularly a young writer, who'll come on and go, no, he's got to say it like this. Like, well, I'm not going up to him and telling him he has to say it like that, because that's ridiculous. But he's getting across emotionally what you want, what you're trying to say, and it's beautiful. And so, I'm not saying anything. Because you go up to an actor and say it like this. I'm like, excuse me? You want me to say how? Go up yourself. You know, it's one of the worst things, you know, in actors is like the thing you should never give an actor is a line, what's called line reading. Like Roman says, when you say this line, say it like this, get out of here, Bob. Like, don't tell me how to say that line. I mean, it's the worst thing you can do for an actor. Though I never minded, I love a good line. And I just worked with Jane Fonda, the wonderful, legendary Jane Fonda. And I worked with Jane, and she said, just give me a line. I was trying to tell her how to say, get out of here, Bob, in a way that was like organic and all this stuff. So it was not to give Jane a line reading. And she just says to me, Andy, give me a line reading. No, don't. Can I give you a line reading? Jane, I'm so sorry. She goes, no, just give me a line reading. Tell me how to say it. I go, get out of here, Bob. She goes, oh, I know. You know, so some actors love it, but generally, no. That was really off topic, so I don't want to tangent there. But, so it depends what say you have. Sometimes you have a lot, sometimes you don't have any. That's, again, one of those things you come into a show, it's like entering a family. It's like, what's the lay of the land on this one? You know? Yeah.
When you're working off of like a famous book, like for instance, Less Than Zero.
Well, the first thing you do if you're working off Less Than Zero is throw the book out.
The question is, are you worried about like changes in tone from like original source material compared to what you're working on?
Well, like for Less Than Zero, for example, like when I signed on to do that movie, we had a really good script. Like I knew Michael Weller, and then when 2 months later, when I showed up to shoot the film, they threw that script out and an entirely different script that had nothing to do with the book. The first script was very much based on the book, and the script we shot had nothing to do with the book. There's not a line from the book in the movie, I don't think. The plot is different, everything is different. And we were all sort of kind of surprised by this. And then in the mid-filming, you know, you realize that subculture of people is very privileged, rich Beverly Hills kids. And who are the children of rich Beverly Hills kids? Who are their parents? But studio executives. And they're like, our kids aren't going to be doing cocaine and this kind of thing, so we've got to change it and, you know, make it Just Say No movies. It was the Nancy Reagan era, Just Say No to drugs. Like, that would work. And, so, you know, now it's about flushing cocaine down the toilet and this kind of stuff. So, it depends. Sometimes you're very loyal to the source material, sometimes they just take the title, which is what they did in Less Than Zero, largely, you know, and it changes. And so, you know, the writer in film, as opposed to television, the writer is the first one thrown under the bus in the movie. First one. Yes. Louder. Not really, but anyway, go on. But I guess I am, go on.
We are from the 80s era. We enjoyed all your movies. I have a two-part question. How did you deal with the Brat Pack era? And how wonderful was it to work with John Hughes?
The Brat Pack thing, I mean, now it's great, because it's like, it's just a moniker for a shorthand for generation or a time period that really meant a lot to a lot of 80s people. You know what I mean? So it's a really lovely thing. I think at the time it was stigmatized a bit. You know, no one ever wants to be sort of labeled, particularly if you're an actor, you don't want to be labeled, put in a box because that's what you do and like that. So I think people fought against it a bit. But as time has worn on, it's sort of, you know, bigger than all of us. So it just is. It's just a thing. And it's great. You know, those movies really capture something that really touched so many people. I was amazed. I'm amazed. And yet we certainly didn't think that at the time. It's just a job and the thing you're doing. And you just had no conception of how it would sort of implant itself in the popular culture for a generation of people. And John Hughes was great. I never really knew John Hughes. He never directed anything I did. People always think he directed Pretty in Pink, but he didn't. He wrote it and he produced it. But again, Howie Deutsch directed it. And John used to pop around at lunchtime and have lunch and play some music on his little thing. I go, what do you think of this song? I'm like, yeah, that's good. I'm like, yeah. You know, and he played the songs, which became the soundtrack, which became so great. So John had a real great ear for that kind of thing. John was, you know, probably a very brilliant guy, but I never really knew him that well. Yeah, I think he was fairly remote, you know. And it's interesting, he was really in touch with something for a generation. He really understood young people and gave them credit for having real problems in a way that no one else did. He took it seriously in a way that, you know, no one had. And, you know, John used his cloud very quickly and very decisively for a very brief period of time, really, and then packed up his toys and went home to Illinois. You know? And I think he had, you know, his early phase of really heartfelt young teen angst kind of dramas were really, he sort of opened his heart. He was a very open-hearted guy, and he opened his heart with that stuff. And then it was sort of enough. Because when you do that, a lot when people come at you because they're so moved, there's sort of the natural tendency is to close up a bit. And I think he closed up and then wrote those fun, stupid comedies, you know, Planes, Trains, Automobiles, Uncle Buck, and all this kind of stuff, which are really funny, but they didn't have the sort of open-hearted kind of empathy and compassion that he really is remembered for and really captured. If that makes any sense.
What do you think was the idea? Because I'm an 80s girl also, and all the movies from the 80s, you talked about it still now, like all the Pretty Big and Simple Fine and Breakfast Club. All those movies are still coming back and still are kids watching them. Now the movies, you can't even remember a movie from 2 years ago. What do you think was that made those movies that they are like?
Well, there are a lot of unmemorable movies we made then too. I was in numerous of them. But I think it's just what we were talking about, that sort of open-hearted kind of genuine respect for young people kind of thing. But then, you know, it's only a handful of movies we're talking about, really. And there are, you know, how many movies were really released then? Hundreds, you know, we're talking about a handful. You know, maybe a dozen if you press, it's hard pressed to name a dozen that are really like, oh, you know what I mean? So, and I think each era has that. But those movies, you know, really have a very specific and real personal stamp of John Hughes. So, and I think it was that. I think they were very, you know, I keep saying open-hearted, but that's what they felt like, in really truthful movies that honored young people's sort of journey. I didn't talk down to them. They weren't, you know, I talked down about them. I was talking right to them. And good is important. It's a really important part of the moment in life. And it is, it's a huge moment in life, you know, when everything is so important. And kind of like going through a dance when you're wearing the right dress is like life-changing, you know? But it is to those people. So, and John understood that, respected it. He didn't comment on it. He didn't think it needed to be made fun of or made, you know, do anything embellished in any way. Just tell that truthfully and with some compassion and empathy for the people. They will build it and they will come, and they did. But I think, you know, there's a lot of crap out there, you know, that we've luckily forgotten about, except for IMDb exists now, so it never goes away. Yep. What makes Orange is the New Black special? I don't know. It's interesting. When I did a lot of on the first season when before it come on, and we thought this is kind of interesting. It's original and it's funny and sad and weird. But I mean, who would ever watch this thing? And it turns out the answer is everybody. And it was also Netflix. It was like Netflix at that time. Netflix, the people that mail you DVDs are making TV shows. What? They're going to stream. It made no sense. You know, this was a few years ago, 3 years ago. And Netflix is so quickly taken over the world, or the whole streaming notion has caught on so quickly. But I think it's original. And Jen G. Cohen, the creator of it, has a real original voice. And again, it has compassion for these people, doesn't judge them, loves them, and all of their cracks and crinkles and foibles and problems and selfishnesses. If that's a word, and you know, really has respect for everybody's sort of path and journey, and it's not like anything else, you know. And the girls are great. The cast is, you know, it's wonderfully cast, and not all of them are great actors, but all of them are great personalities, and they all fill their little niche, and together it makes this tapestry of, you know, chaotic joy, you know. And it's like life. It's very funny at one moment, and it's very sad. It's like, wow, that caught me off guard. And now I'm laughing. I can't believe I'm laughing again. You know, so it's his own thing. I think most TV shows that are really successful are the product of one person's voice. And Jen did that, and Breaking Bad was a product of that guy's voice. You know, these kind of shows to warrant where they really need one guiding vision. Sort of, and then it's variables within it, but there's a real point of view. You know, when shows are made by committee, they tend to just sort of flatten out and become ultimately not that interesting, I think. What? Stand up and say all that again. Am I saying that? Hi, Ivy. Why are you here?
It's kind of like a daddy-daughter thing, so he's being really nice and telling us about it.
Come talk to me now. All right. Hi, back there with yell.
Okay, did you ever, when you were filming, putting in paint, ever think that it was going to be like a big deal now? It's like, it's my favorite movie and it was my mom's favorite movie, so it's like, how did you feel like?
Never in a million years did I think it would still. I'll tell you how I'm not thinking of it that way. How much? So in that last scene I talked about where we reshot the end there, and then I got the girl. I was doing a play in New York at the time on Broadway, and I had a shaved head. I was doing some war play, so I had a shaved head. And so we had to go back and film this, redo the prom scene when I'm there and show up. And tell her that I always believed in you, I just didn't believe in me, and all that lovely stuff. And we just they made the cheapest, worst wig for me, and it sits on my head like a little dead rodent on top of my head, and it gives me a look of being really forlorn looking, and it's wig acting. So if you watch the movie and you just see, when I'm telling all these very sensitive words that have lived now for generations, you'll see that I'm wearing a really bad wig on my head, and it's also a cockeyed, looks really cheap and forlorn. That's how much people did not think we'd still be talking about Pretty in Pink 2 generations later. It's like, this movie's gonna die, let's just get the cheapest wig we can and let's just shoot this and get it over with. And there you go. So, but it actually helped me quite a lot because it gave me a really sad look.
First, it kind of broke my heart a little bit that, you know, you don't get lines, I guess.
No, I do. It's terrible. I know, but it's a terrible thing because people really attach themselves. Guys attach themselves to these really dumb lines when we get at Bernie's, and they come up and they act them out for me. And then like when I don't go, oh dude, that's so awesome, and high five them, they're like, dude, I've been done this for 20 years. And I'm like, sorry, you're right, I'm not properly respecting your investment in Bernie. And I'm sorry, I didn't scoff, but I'm just embarrassed, and that's why.
Actually, Weekend at Bernie's is one of my favorites. My mom said when it came out, I made them and let me watch it every day over and over. Did you guys, what kind of stuff do you guys do to kind of save some pass of time on any movies? Really, did you ever play pranks on people, or what kind of stuff did you do?
Well, that movie, particularly, we made a lot of that up as we went along. That movie, you know, usually, often when you do comedies, to you it's very funny on the set, you think you're really, really funny, and then it just dies. You know, the sort of rule of thumb is that if it's funny to you, it won't be funny to other people. And we thought that movie was hysterical. We were making that movie, and oh my God, we are so funny here. I mean, this is so funny. Let's throw him over the balcony. Yeah. Let's throw him over the balcony. What if he washes out to sea? Yeah. Wash out to sea. Let's staple his toupee. What if we say? What if we staple? We made a lot of this stuff up, and we just did some. What stupid things can we think of? And let's do that. And we did. And so, and it worked. I mean, I think that movie still is. You know, I saw it about a year ago. It was quite funny. In its own stupid way. It's good if you smoke pot. I don't know if it's better, and if you drink a little bit, it's even better. But you know, it has that kind of movie. We had a good time just sort of making stuff up. And the writer was good enough to go, yeah, just do it. A lot of writers would be like, no, my script. I'm like, luckily he realized he had not written King Lear and was, you know, okay. Never mess around with it. And so, but you know, and then some shows are just a nightmare to do. It was no fun at all. Like Lessons Here was no fun at all to make. It was just a downer. You knew it was a downer. I was like, this is really a downer. It wasn't any fun to make. There was no joking and pranking, hanging around, you know. And, but usually it's just going to work, you know. I mean, you know, they're 12 hours a day, and you know, you go to work. It's fine. It's good. It's like it's glorified like bricks. It's a great job, but it's a job, you know. So but it's great. But often it's more boring than people think. I guess that's it. When people come visit the set, they're often bored. They're often bored. Some people are mesmerized and get it right away. Like, oh my God, it's like carnival life in a certain way. You know what I mean? It's like, and everybody's doing a little job. You can't really tell what everybody's doing, but everybody has a job. Like, what's that person do? What's a festival? What's that? You know. So when people come, it's often, you know, you either get it kind of and you're mesmerized, where you're like, this is great. When's it come out? You know, and then are bored within 20 minutes. A lot of standing around. It is. So it's a weird. It's a weird argument. If you come to a set, you'll see most people standing around. It seems like 50 people are doing nothing and 3 people are doing something. And at any given time, that's the case. But those 3 people can't do their job, so these 3 people have done theirs, and those 3 people have done theirs, and those 3 people have done theirs. And if these 3 people didn't do it, then these people are totally screwed. We're going to go back. We're going to do, you know, and there's a lot of that. And so if in those moments of tension, if you're on those 3 people and you're not getting it done right away, there's a lot of eyes on you, a lot of pressure on you. And then for our, you know, the acting things, you know, people often say hours of boredom for moments of panic. You know, and that's sort of what happens. That makes any sense. Hi. Oh, you again.
Yes. I know we're going to probably get another answer to this question, but can you give me some interesting story from the Benecker Gang?
The Benecker Gang was a movie a after-school special I did. It was the second job I ever had in 1980, and in 1983, and when I was 4, and. There's no interesting story for Benecker Gang. It was a lovely movie. There was a thing called an after-school special, which no longer exists, which was on at like 3:30 in the afternoon for kids to come home and watch on TV. You know, a young-ish, you know, we were all much more innocent then. But it was done. It was very well done, and so they said no, we'll release it as a movie, which is what they did. And so it was one of the first low-budget movies because it was made for such a cheap price because it was supposed to be an after-school special. But there's nothing funny about it. No good stories about it, except that 30 years later, if you stick around long enough, you run into everybody again. I just was doing the show, I mentioned Happy-ish, the Showtime show, and the head producer on that was the director of Benecker Gang, which was originally called Dear Lola. And so I saw him again for the first time in 30 years. I mean, he had the 8x10s, which they, you know, the 8x10 glossies, which you see out there, all of us, you know, on the set directing, and he would embarrass me by calling him out when I was a very small 4-year-old child. So that's my own Benecker Gang story. Sorry. Anyone else? Hi. You notice I'm calling people in the front? That's what I'm doing. Yeah. out yet. They got in all sorts of legal trouble about ownership and stuff. So they're still fighting over who owns it and stuff. I don't think it's very good anyway. I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah, but there's some ownership issues. Producers suing each other. And producers sue each other. It's best to move on and do other things and forget about it. So, anyway.
What about having the St. Elmo's Fire reunion? So we know what happened to those characters afterwards?
There was talk of doing the St. Elmo's Fire reunion for a while, but to be honest, Emilio Estevez wants nothing to do with it. I think the rest of us would have been fine, kind of be fun or whatever, but Emilio's like, he's drawing, so not interested. So, but I mean, I don't really think there'd be that much to say. We'd all just be considered, you know, like grown-up people with boring jobs. Yeah, I don't think Kevin would ever become a politician. He'd be unemployed and homeless. But, you know, I think sometimes it's best just to leave those things alone, which Mannequin 2 would be or Weekend at Bernie's 2 would be a perfect example of that. Leave those things alone. But that was one of those cases where people were like, well, we can shoot at St. Thomas. They're going to pay us a good amount of money. I'm like, I'll go. You know? What's the script? Well, we haven't figured that out yet. Oh, it'll be fine. And then we get there, it's like he's underwater and he does like this voodoo dance. I'm like, really? Oh, dude. So, alright.
Were you offered Mannequin 2?
I was offered Mannequin 2. Yeah, should have done it. Just because I thought the first one was a really sweet movie. You know, I remember when I read Mannequin, I thought this is a lovely movie. And then I read it again right before we shot, and I went, oh my God, this is terrible. And I called up my agent, I said, you gotta get me out of this movie. It's about a guy who falls in love with this dummy, and you know, I was terrible. I can't do this movie. And so I'll tell you a pretty big story about that same kind of thing in a second. But, and then I really loved it, and I had great affection for that movie because there's not a cynical bone in that movie's body, you know? Is that what I said? You know, it's just a very, again, a sweet, lovely movie, you know, and it has a real good heart. And I don't know why I didn't do the second one at the time, but I was doing something else, and I said, nah, I don't want to do it, I'm doing something else. And, you know, but, you know, why not? You know, because I never saw the second one, but it's certainly, you know, you don't want things to sort of taint your stuff. But in Pretty Pink, also, I have to say that same kind of thing. I'll tell you, I was young and I needed a job. And so I didn't finish reading the script. I read the script, I got the idea, and I went and I auditioned for the part. And Molly Ringwald is what got me the job, because it was written for a sort of jock, a hulking, you know, big guy, square-jawed, kind of, you know, school jock, quarterback, football quarterback. And they let me go audition because I'd just been in St. Elmo's Fire, and so they didn't go audition. And, but it's not right, it's not what we were looking for. But Molly was reading with the actors, and I read with Molly. Molly, I walked out of the room, and Molly said, that's the kind of guy I fall for, not some big, lug, you know, jock. And so Molly got me the job, so I was forever grateful to her. But I needed the job, they gave me the job, and I didn't bother reading the whole script. And then as I was on the plane out to Los Angeles to go do the movie, from home I thought maybe it's time to read the script. So I read it and I realized at the end, I said, oh wait, I don't get the girl at the end? I mess up and I'm like, huh? I got up front and called Maggie and said, look, I don't want to do this movie, I'm a jerk at the end of this movie. I'm like, honey, you read this script. I'm like, well, I just did now. But anyway, all is well that ends well, the movie shot. So everybody's a winner. But, yeah. It's great. James has become, I hadn't seen James in about, you know, I'd say a long time. And the question was how, why was I working with Jimmy and James Spader after so many years that we did. We did 4 movies together. And as James said to me for when I saw him again for the film, because Andrew, I've just grown into myself. And you know what I mean? He's exactly, if you look at him now, he's exactly the way he wanted to be then, as a 20-year-old. He's just sort of grown into being more James. Talks slower and just is. And it's great. He's one of a kind, and I love him. James has one speed. And you're never going to get James from anything but be James. And he's really smart, and he's just himself. And he's grown into, glacially grown into that thing that is James Spader. So, and I always appreciate James. I love James as a James. He's so unique, he's one of a kind, and he's crazy, and mad as a hatter. You know, and he knows it, and he knows that about himself, and he's just, you know, so I find him all very charming, and he's very smart. And so, I like smart actors. I don't like dumb actors. You know, I like him smart and fast, and he may not be a fast talker, but he's fast thinker. And so it's great. And I have a real short hair with James. Within a minute, we were back to, you know, saying, James, I don't want to say that. Okay, James, you want to say this is bad, or you're just being difficult? I love you, Andy. Let's shoot. So, but it's great, you know. James has turned into the 800-pound gorilla in the room. You know what I mean? And I can talk. And James, you know, and James is one of those people that, you know, he'll eat you for lunch. If you don't know what you're doing, he'll eat you for lunch. You do, he'll go, that's fine, let's do that. You know what I mean? So he's good. Have we done it? Yes.
What do you like better, acting or directing?
Good question. I liked, acting is just so much easier. And like I said, I hadn't acted, I think you were late, you missed this portion of the evening, but I was kind of over-acting to a large degree. And because as the older I got, I think I got kind of self-conscious acting a bit in a certain way. And the more you act, you get very aware of yourself. You know what I mean? You see yourself a lot on things, and you sort of build up this sort of mask of yourself. And that's not how I was when I first started acting. This is actually a truthful answer, you may not want it. But it's not how I was when I started out. When I started, I was like, yeah, this is great, let's just do this. You know what I mean? I was young and eager, you know. And then as you get older, I found out I was more guarded and protected and not doing it as well. I may have had more skills because I've been doing it longer, so my sort of toolbox was bigger, but I didn't get as much joy, and I wasn't really as good at it. And so, and I found I liked the aspect of telling the whole story and having a little distance. Directing all this. But then when I acted recently in this television show again, I thought if I'm going to do this again, then I'd like to do it the way I first did it, which was just like, wow, I'm just here. So I did it, and it was, I didn't find out what lens was on the camera, I didn't put in my 2 cents when it wasn't asked for about how we should be shooting it, and any of that stuff, and I was just like a kid again acting. And it was a real joy and a real pleasure. So I was thrilled when I picked it up and we'll do some more of it. But I suppose I like having, you know, directing honestly is 5 times the work for half the money. That's sort of the great thing. It's a lot more work because you're there, it's just a lot more work. And acting is also very subjective. I'm just seeing the whole world from my little point of view. You know what I mean? Whereas directing is responsible for the whole picture. And there's something about that that appeals to me. I like that, sort of seeing the whole thing. And you know, I was greatly relieved not to have to worry about what my hair looked like often. You know what I mean? A lot of the actor neuroses. You know, I'm a fairly good director because I have every actor neuroses there is. So when an actor's behaving in a certain way, I kind of go, well, why, when I'm behaving in a jerk like that, what's my problem? Oh, I usually don't know my lines. Oh, hey, Timmy, we're just going to do the first line from this shot, and then we'll do another shot. And suddenly Timmy's really charming again. You know? So I like them both. If you'd had talked to me 6 months ago, I would have said directing, and now having just acted again and enjoyed it so much, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of. But it's also something I've been doing since I was 17 years old. So it's like, which makes it almost 20 years now I've been doing it. So it's like breathing to me. I just get it, and I know the rhythm of being an actor very much. So you know, I like them both. It's like, and I'm also, you know, in my early life, I'm a travel writer as well, and I like to have many different things. So I get bored, I guess, is the answer. So I do a lot of different things, and they're all sort of the same thing. I like sort of mixing things up and trying to be creative. You know what I mean? Whether it's good or bad creative is not really my business. I just like to be. I'm often very grateful that I have a job, and many jobs that where creativity is the basic. I don't, and my whole life has been that way. I'm a very bad businessman, and I don't have any skills. I was kicked out of college. I couldn't do anything if I had to. I wouldn't know how to do a job. But I'm very grateful that everything I do is sort of creatively based, and that's how I operate in the world. And I'm lucky that I have that in my life. Because a lot of people just go to jobs, you know, and they do their time, and then they just do their time so they can get out, and I'm grateful that I don't have that. You know, my jobs all bleed over into my life all the time, which is a mess. And you know, you wish sometimes it was compartmentalized, but there's often bleed over all the time. And you know, there's no separation. I like that. I feel very lucky that I've had that in my life. My life's sort of structured like that. Or I've structured like that because I'm not disciplined in that way. Do that stuff. You know, we all find our way and it suits us and it fits us, hopefully. Because you know, if you're not happy in your work, then it's hard to be happy in life like that. You know what I mean? If you, there's Plato or one of these brilliant philosophers said, you know, you give a man who's happy in his work, I'll show you a happy man. You know what I mean? I think to a large degree, work can sustain us and, you know, ground us. Anyway, that's my spiel on work. But that was not your question, was it? On tangents here, sorry. So I like both.